The city still reeked of ash and charred flesh. King's Landing, once the pride of Westeros, now stood in ruin. Rubble smothered the streets, smoke twisted through the air like ghosts searching for peace, and silence had become the loudest sound. Arya. Stark walked alone through the remains of Flea Bottom, her boots crunching over blackened bone and crumbled stone. Her face, streaked with soot and blood, was unreadable, cold and hollow like the city around her. She had seen death, but this was madness. This was something worse. She thought of the little girl with the wooden horse, the one she had tried to save. Her screams still echoed in Arya's ears. That child hadn't died in battle. She had died running from a queen who promised to free the people. Arya clenched her jaw. Daenerys Targaryen, breaker of chains, had broken far more than that. She had broken the very soul of Westeros, and someone needed to stop her. The next day, the Red Keep stood barely holding together. Its towers had been scorched, and only the great hall remained somewhat intact, sitting like a throne atop a graveyard. Arya slipped in unnoticed. She didn't wear the face of another. Not this time. This time she came as Arya Stark of Winterfell. Inside, Jon Snow stood by Daenerys. His eyes looked tired, searching, betrayed. She could see the conflict inside him. Duty and love were tearing him apart. But he was still hesitating, still unsure if the woman before him was a conqueror or a liberator. Gone mad, Arya didn't have time for doubt. She watched as Daenerys laid her hand gently on Drogon's snout outside, whispering to him in Valyrian, and then stepped alone toward the Iron Throne. Her fingers brushed the cold, melted steel, and in that moment, Arya stepped from the shadows. "You don't deserve that throne." Arya's voice was cold, steady. Daenerys turned, startled at first, then calm. "You're Arya Stark. You came here to kill me, didn't you?" Arya didn't blink. "You already know the answer." Daenerys stepped forward slowly, speaking with the same zeal that had justified slaughter. "They were enemies. I gave them freedom, peace. You gave them fire," Arya interrupted, voice trembling now, not from fear but fury. "Children, women, innocents, you burned them all." Dany's gaze hardened. "They would have never accepted me." "I had to show strength," Arya stepped forward. "No, you had to show mercy. That's what queens do." In a flash, quicker than thought, needle slipped from Arya's sleeve, and before Daenerys could call for Drogon, the blade pierced her side. Daenerys gasped, stumbling, her eyes wide with disbelief. Arya held her steady, her voice a whisper. "For the girl with the horse." The queen fell, her blood pooling around the remnants of the throne she never got to sit on. Jon rushed in just moments. Too late, his sword drawn, his face pale. "What have you done?" he whispered. Arya turned to him, her face unreadable. "What you couldn't." Drogon landed with a furious roar, his great wings sending a storm of ash into the air. He saw his mother's body and let out a sound that shook the earth. Arya stepped in front of Jon instinctively, hand gripping her blade. But instead of burning them, Drogon screamed into the sky and melted the Iron Throne until it was nothing but slag. Then he flew away, with Daenerys clutched in his talons. The throne was gone. The queen was dead, and Arya Stark had just changed the course of history. Smoke still lingered over King's Landing, thick as guilt in the lungs. Word spread like wildfire. Daenerys Targaryen was dead, and it wasn't Jon Snow who struck her. Down it was Arya Stark. Whispers turned to screams in the Red Keep. The unsullied closed ranks. Grey Worm's rage knew no language, only violence. Tyrion, locked in a cell, heard the walls shake from the chaos above. And outside, Jon stood in the courtyard with blood on his hands. But not hers. Arya had disappeared. The Council of Lords and Ladies, summoned in desperate urgency, gathered in what remained of the dragon pit. Sansa came from the north, her face harder than stone. Davos, Brienne, Gendry, Samwell, all sat waiting, their eyes heavy with questions no one wanted to answer. What she did, Tyrion began when they finally let him speak, was murder. But what Daenerys did was genocide. Silence. She didn't wait for justice. She became it, he continued. Arya Stark chose vengeance over trial, over mercy. Sansa didn't flinch. Would you have preferred my sister stood by while another mad queen ruled over Ash? Gendry spoke up, quieter. She killed the queen, the people's queen. That's not justice. That's rebellion. Jon wasn't at the meeting. He hadn't been seen since the moment Drogon disappeared into the sky. The only thing left in his place was a shattered soul. He stayed at the remains of the great sept, brooding where history once stood, and waiting because Arya would return. And she did. 3 nights later, Arya rode into the Red Keep, cloaked and quiet. She came not for the throne, what was left of it, but for truth, for closure. She found Jon by the broken statues of the gods they once prayed to. He didn't rise, didn't turn. You killed her, he said, as if the weight of it had finally landed. I saved you, Arya replied, and the rest of the realm. She was still someone His voice cracked, and he swallowed it down. Arya sat beside him. I know. For a long moment neither spoke, just ghosts in a graveyard of kings and queens. You think this ends with her? Arya finally asked. The Unsullied want blood. The Lords want answers. You think Bran wants to rule now that he's seen how easily rulers die? Jon turned to her, his eyes burning. You made the choice, not the people, not the gods, you. She met his gaze, unwavering. And I'd do it again. In the dungeons, Tyrion was finally released, but not pardoned. His fate, like everyone else's, now rested in the hands of chaos. Grey Worm issued a demand. Arya, Stark, must face execution. Sansa countered. Any man who harms her will face the full wrath of the North. The realm was splitting again, torn between loyalty, blood, and fear. And in the middle of it all stood Arya. That night, she dreamt of faces, all the ones she'd worn, all the ones she'd taken, and Daenerys was among them now, staring back with burning eyes. You killed the future, the Dream Queen said. No, Arya whispered. I ended a nightmare. The next morning, Arya stood before the realm, not as a Stark, not as a faceless assassin, but as the woman who killed the last Dragon Queen, and she didn't ask for forgiveness, she demanded peace. But peace never comes without a price, and soon the first blade of retribution would be drawn. The sky over King's Landing was grey, not with smoke this time, but with dread. The city had become a boiling pot of tension. The queen was gone, the throne was melted, and in the vacuum of power, fear grew louder than any ruler. The Unsullied held their lines tighter than ever before. Grey Worm had stopped speaking. His orders came sharp and wordless, through glares and sword points. Every time he looked toward Arya, the hatred in his eyes was too pure to hide. But Arya didn't run. She stood at the Red Keep's crumbling balcony every morning, watching the ruins below. The people didn't cheer for her. They didn't thank her. She'd expected that, maybe even wanted it that way. In their eyes, she was just another shadow in a long line of monsters with power. Tyrion, now freed but kept under constant watch, found himself called back into matters of politics. He had barely spoken to Arya since her return, but he knew they were both trapped in the same game, just on opposite ends of the board. It won't be long now, he told her one night in the halls. They'll either crown someone or kill someone, possibly both. Arya smirked faintly. You always did have a way with optimism. Tyrion leaned against the stone wall. You remind me of Jaime when he killed the Mad King. He thought he was saving the realm too. He was, she replied, and yet they called him Kingslayer, not Savior. Arya shrugged. Let them call me what they want. I didn't do it for them. Sansa sent word from the north, short, direct. Return now, you are not safe there. But Arya ignored it. Meanwhile, Jon remained in the shadows of the city. He didn't attend the new council, didn't speak to the people. The death of Daenerys hung around his shoulders like chains. He walked like a ghost, feeding the rumors that he'd gone mad or worse, was planning to take the throne himself. Yet, his silence said something far more dangerous. It said he no longer believed in any of it. In the Dragon Pit, the Lords gathered again. The Vale, the Reach, Dawn, the Iron Islands, even new houses formed from the ashes. Gendry spoke for Storm's End. Yara Greyjoy stood alone but unwavering. Robin Arryn had grown into a man, but not much of a leader. Bran had come too, brought by Sansa's insistence, not to rule but to watch. Tyrion stood in the center. "We must choose a path forward," he said, "or the people will tear one through us." Yara was first to speak. "The woman who murdered Daenerys Targaryen must be punished. If we let her walk free, what stops others from killing kings and queens?" Gendry nodded reluctantly. "She killed a monarch. That's treason." Sansa stepped forward, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "She killed a tyrant. That's justice," Robin chimed in, uncertain. "But who decides? Shouldn't we vote? Isn't that what we talked about before?" Tyrion raised a brow. "Democracy? That won't go far here. These lords barely agree on breakfast." The room shifted. Alliances changed with every breath. The only thing they agreed on was this. Arya Stark had changed the rules, and no one knew what came next. Outside, Grey Worm had made his decision. He gathered his soldiers. He wouldn't wait for councils or lords. Arya would pay for what she did with her life. As they marched toward the Red Keep, Arya stood atop the broken walls, looking down. She'd seen them coming. And she didn't run. Arya didn't move from the high stone ledge of the Red Keep as Grey Worm and his Unsullied drew closer. Their black armor, still spotless in a sea of ruin, reflected no sunlight, only war. They came like a storm, organized, quiet, inevitable. She stood alone. No guards, no stark banners behind her. Just Needle at her side and the weight of every name on her list, even the ones she hadn't known she'd one day add. Inside the keep, tension crackled like lightning. Jon had heard the march. He'd seen Grey Worm's eyes that morning and knew the man wasn't bluffing. Tyrion paced in his chambers, murmuring to himself about justice and blood and choices no one wanted to make. Sansa's letter remained unread on the table, but Arya, she had already made peace with this moment. The Unsullied flooded the base of the keep like a black tide. At their front, Grey Worm raised his hand. His voice echoed up the stone steps like steel scraping bone. "Arya Stark of Winterfell, you are under arrest for the murder of Queen Daenerys Stormborn." Arya leaned on the wall edge, looking down, as if she were weighing whether to jump or reply. Her voice rang out clear and cold. "She burned children alive, women, innocents. That's not a queen. That's a butcher with a crown." Grey Worm's jaw clenched. "You don't get to decide." Arya narrowed her eyes. Someone had to. The gates behind her creaked open. Jon stepped into the light, sword at his hip, not drawn, yet. "Grey Worm," he said, loud enough to carry. "Stand down." "You stand with her?" Grey Worm's words dripped with disbelief and fury. "I stand with the realm," Jon said, stepping closer. "Killing her won't fix this. It'll start another war." "It already is war," Grey Worm growled. "And this time, we finish it." The Unsullied took one step forward. Arya's fingers twitched near her blade. Then came the sound of horns. From the north gates of the city, a host began to pour in. Fur-lined armor, sigils of the direwolf flapping in the wind. The north had arrived. Sansa had not waited for permission. She had sent her bannerman with an order: protect Arya at any cost. The northerners were led by Ser Davos, and Ser Brienne, flanking a grim-faced Tormund Giantsbane, who looked all too eager for blood. Grey Worm turned, rage flashing in his eyes. "You bring an army into the Queen's city? She's not queen anymore," Davos said coolly. "And Arya's no prisoner." The standoff stretched like drawn bowstrings, every man on edge, every sword ready to taste blood. Tyrion rushed from the keep, waving his arms. "Stop, all of you," he bellowed. "You're going to burn this city again before it ever has a chance to rebuild." He looked at Grey Worm, then at Jon. "There's another way." Jon scowled. "What are you saying?" "Send Arya away," Tyrion said, each word measured like a blade on a scale. "Exile her. Let the realm know justice was done without shedding more blood. Let her go where no queen or council will ever touch her." Arya looked at him like he was mad. "You want me to run?" "No," Tyrion said. "I want you to live." The air held still. Grey Worm considered it. His hand flexed at his side. "You banish her," he said, "or we kill her now." Jon looked at Arya. She didn't flinch. "I won't beg." "You wouldn't be Arya if you did," Jon murmured. Tyrion looked to the council gathering behind him. Sansa, who had just arrived, nodded once. Even Bran, unmoving quiet, spoke. "She does not belong in this world anymore." And that was it. Decision made. Arya Stark, the girl who killed the Queen, would be exiled beyond Westeros. Not as punishment, but as preservation, for the realm, for peace. And as the Northerners slowly lowered their weapons and the Unsullied backed away with grudging hate, Arya realized, this was how legends die, not in flame, not in glory, but in silence. The wind howled across the deck of the small ship as it sailed into the unknown, beyond Westeros, beyond the edge of every map, drawn by maesters and madmen. Arya Stark stood alone at the bow, eyes fixed on the horizon that had no name. Her hair whipped in the cold sea wind, and for the first time in weeks, no voices argued, no armies marched, no blood stained her hands. She was free, and yet she'd never felt heavier. The North had said their farewells quietly. Sansa had held her hand longer than usual, her voice steady but strained. "If you find something worth returning for," she'd said, "come back. Otherwise, write. Let me know you're alive." Arya had nodded, but she knew even then, this wasn't a round trip. This was exile in every sense of the word. Jon hadn't said goodbye, not directly. She had seen him from across the docks, standing with Ghost at his side. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment. No words, just an understanding carved from blood and shared silence. Tyrion had been the last to speak to her. He'd offered her a small leather-bound journal and said, "If you find the edge of the world, write it down. Someone has to." Now, days into the journey, Arya's ship cut through black waters, the stars guiding her westward toward something nameless. She didn't fear the seas. She feared what would be left of her when she found whatever lay beyond. One evening, as the sun sank behind the waves in violent orange, the ship was rocked by a sharp jolt. The crew scrambled, shouts in 3 languages all clashing. Arya rushed to the side just as a sailor screamed, pointing off the stern. There, rising from the sea, was something they didn't have a word for. A black spire of rock, taller than the wall, jutting straight out of the ocean like a spear through the world. But it wasn't just stone. It pulsed like it was alive. And as the ship drew near, Arya felt something deep inside her shift. A sensation she hadn't felt since Braavos. Magic. The captain, a leathery old woman with no fear of gods, refused to go closer. "This place wasn't meant for men or monsters," she muttered. "If you step off this ship, girl, I won't wait for you." Arya didn't hesitate. With needle strapped to her hip, she climbed into the rowboat and paddled to shore alone. The sea was unnaturally still, the silence thick. As she stepped onto the black shore, she looked around. No birds, no animals. No sound, only the whisper of wind that carried no source. The ground felt warm beneath her feet. The air shimmered as if it held secrets too old to die. She walked deeper into the strange island. Strange trees twisted like they were caught mid-scream. Symbols were etched into stone, glowing faintly blue. She recognized none of it, but her instinct screamed this place had known death, and then she saw it, carved into the largest stone, covered in moss and shadow, the face of a wolf. Not just any wolf, a dire wolf. Her blood froze. Someone, or something, had been expecting a Stark. She took another step forward and felt a sharp pain pierce behind her eyes. A rush of visions flashed. Faces, fire, ancient battles, a tree burning, a sword plunged into the sky. It wasn't prophecy. It was memory, but not hers. Then, a voice. Soft, not spoken, but pressed into her mind. You are not the first to come. But you may be the last. Arya fell to her knees, gasping. What lay beyond Westeros wasn't just new land. It was the beginning of something old awakening, and she had just become part of it. The wind on the island had a voice, not the kind that rustled leaves or howled through cracks, but one that whispered directly to Arya's bones. Each gust seemed to say her name, not in sound, but in feeling. The further she walked from the shoreline, the more it felt like something ancient was breathing just beneath the surface. She pressed forward, hand on needle's hilt, though she knew no blade could protect her here. The forest grew stranger the deeper she went. The trees leaned unnaturally. Their trunks warped like melted wax. Their roots pulsed faintly, glowing beneath the soil in veins of dull blue light. She noticed bones tangled in some of them, animal at first, then unmistakably human. Still, she walked. She found a ruined structure nestled deep in the hills, half swallowed by nature. Not a castle, not a hut. Something older, more primal, built of black stone that shimmered like ice but burned to the touch. The doorway was narrow and tall, shaped like an eye. Arya paused before it, heart pounding. Inside, something called to her, not with fear, but recognition. When she entered, the temperature dropped. The air tasted metallic, like blood and storm water. In the center of the room stood a massive pillar of translucent crystal. Within it swirled shadows that moved as if alive. Then it spoke again, not a voice, but a force pressing against her mind. Daughter of the North, slayer of queens, walker of faces. Arya stepped closer, her eyes locked on the shadows swirling inside. What are you? The voice responded like a ripple through time. We are what came before, what still breathes beneath the skin of the world. The Starks were our watchers, our blades, our memory. She didn't understand. I'm no watcher. I'm no one. The shadows twisted. A vision slammed into her mind. A wolf bleeding. A man with burning blue eyes. A sword in snow. A red woman crying in a field of fire. Then a girl in the dark, holding a blade, dripping with queen's blood. You were always meant to be more. Arya stumbled back. Why me? The voice whispered, colder now. Because you crossed death and came back. Because you carry a name older than the wall. Because the world is not done with you. Her breath came hard, chest tight. She'd crossed oceans for peace. She'd come here to disappear, and now the world was trying to give her purpose again. She clenched her fists. I didn't come here to serve anyone, she growled. Then come here to choose. The crystal cracked. A wind howled through the chamber, bringing with it memories not her own, battles under twin moons, white shadows walking beneath black suns, a king of ash rising in a world drowned by time. Then it showed her Winterfell, but not as it was, burned, frozen, empty, Jon older, alone, wearing black again. His eyes full of ghosts, Sansa, crowned, but surrounded by enemies wearing smiles, and Bran, motionless in his chair but bleeding from the eyes. Arya gasped and stumbled back. Is this a vision? A threat? A warning? The voice faded like fog in sunlight. Behind her, the crystal shattered. On the floor in the rubble lay a blade, pale steel, thinner than needle but sharp enough to hum in the air. It was marked with the sigil of a wolf at the hilt. Arya stared. A gift, a weapon, or a curse? She reached for it, and the moment her hand wrapped around the hilt, she heard a scream in the distance, a human scream. She wasn't alone on the island anymore. The scream tore through the still air like a knife through silk. Raw, panicked human, Arya spun around, the strange blade clenched in her hand. It felt unnaturally light, but the way it buzzed with energy in her grip told her it wasn't just metal. It was something alive, or had once been. The hilt pulsed faintly with warmth, like it remembered battle. She dashed from the ruin, boots crunching across the stone, her instincts returning instantly. Her breath fogged as she ran, even though the air had no cold in it. The scream echoed again, this time closer, followed by the unmistakable clang of steel. When she reached the clearing, the sight stopped her dead. 3 figures stood beneath, a massive dead tree, its branches curled like skeletal fingers. One man knelt, arms pinned behind him by some kind of invisible force. 2 others circled him like wolves. They wore strange cloaks of shimmering black and silver, and their faces were covered in masks, shaped like the faces of beasts, one a fox, the other a crow. Arya crouched in the brush, studying their movements. The restrained man looked to be a sailor, one of the crew from her ship, but she couldn't be sure. His face was swollen, bleeding, his mouth gagged. The masked one spoke in a language she didn't understand, harsh, clipped, rhythmic. But it wasn't just foreign, it was wrong. The sound of it twisted in her head like thorns. The fox-masked one raised a blade unlike any she'd seen before, curved, bone-white, and humming with that same unnatural vibration as the one she held. That was enough. Arya stepped into the clearing. Let him go. The 2 figures turned in, eerie unison. The fox mask tilted, as if intrigued. Arya raised her blade. I won't say it again. The crow-masked figure took a slow step forward. Then in perfect common tongue his voice rasped, another one marked by the wolf. Arya's eyes narrowed. Who are you? He didn't answer. Instead he struck. He moved fast, faster than anything human should. But Arya wasn't new to fast. She ducked under the swing, twisting into a crouch and slashed upward. Her blade clashed against his, and the sound wasn't metal. It was like wind and scream colliding. Sparks, not of fire but light, flew into the air. The fox lunged in next, forcing Arya to roll away, blade spinning in her hand. Her training with the faceless men kicked in like second nature. She struck low, slicing across the fox's leg. Except there was no blood. Instead, a hiss of mist escaped the wound, and the flesh beneath looked like ice and shadow. They weren't men. They wore the skins of men, spoke in the tongues of death, but they were something far older. Something that had waited in the silence beyond the sea. Arya fought like she was born for it. Her blade moved like a whisper, cutting, dodging, parrying. She remembered every fight she'd ever survived. Syrio, the Waif, Brienne, the Night King's undead. But these weren't like them. They didn't bleed, and they didn't tire. After what felt like an eternity of breathless movement, Arya feinted left and drove her blade through the crow's throat. The figure staggered back, clutching at the wound as light poured from it, flickering like a dying star. The fox let out a howl, not human, not beast, but something worse, and retreated, scooping up its dying companion and vanishing into the forest in a blink. The man on the ground gasped as Arya cut his restraints. He looked up at her with wide, terrified eyes. What were they? He stammered. Arya stood over him, blade still glowing faintly in her hand. Her voice came out low. I don't know, but I think they were waiting for me. In the distance, a rumble shook the earth, not thunder, something waking up, waking up. The island was no longer silent. That low rumble beneath Arya's feet hadn't stopped since the masked figures vanished. The earth itself seemed restless, pulsing like it was alive and angry. The man she'd rescued refused to go any farther. Inland, he waited at the edge of the forest, muttering prayers to gods Arya had never heard of, but she didn't wait. With the pale blade in hand, she followed the tremors back toward the shattered temple, the heart of whatever this place was. The ground cracked with each step. Fissures split the soil, releasing faint streams of silver mist. The trees bent away from her path, not in fear, but in recognition, as if the island knew who she was. As she approached the ruins again, the strange symbols on the stone glowed brighter until they weren't just symbols but words. Old tongue, Valyrian, first men, high Valyrian, even Bravosi. All of them merged into something universal, something only understood in the soul. She didn't read them, she felt them. Guardians forgotten, blood awakened, the Watcher returns. The broken crystal from before had reformed, taller now, jagged and burning with an inner storm. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and this time the voice inside wasn't calm. It was urgent. The others were not defeated. They were delayed. Arya stared at the light inside the pillar, now shifting into familiar forms. White Walkers, but older, wiser, not bound by night kings or thrones. These were the true ancients, the ones even the children of the forest had feared, and behind them, buried in shadow, was a door, a gate, sealed, for now. The voice whispered again, "Winter is not gone. It waits behind the world." Arya took a step back, her breath sharp in her chest. "Why me? Why show me this?" "Because death chose. You said no. And then it came, rising from the fissures in the earth, slowly assembling from mist, bones, and broken time, a creature, neither dead nor alive, with a face made of ever-shifting features. One moment it was the waif, then the Night King, then Daenerys, then Arya herself. It spoke in a voice that was hers and not hers. "You cannot run from what you are." Arya didn't flinch. "And what am I?" The creature bared its shifting face in a twisted grin. The sword, the lock, the key. It lunged. The battle wasn't fought with blades alone. Every strike with the pale sword sent ripples through the earth. Visions assaulted her, memories not her own. A baby left in the snow, a sword forged in dragonfire, a raven with 3 eyes crying in a storm. But she didn't break. She'd fought shadows before, faces, kings. This one, it bled light, and Arya Stark made sure it bled plenty. With one final scream, she drove the blade into the creature's core. The earth split open, and the crystal behind it shattered in a shockwave of light that blinded her. When it cleared, the creature was gone. The gate behind it, still sealed, for now, but cracks had formed. The voice returned one last time, faint and fading. "Guard the door, or the world burns again." Arya stood in the rubble, the blade now dim, its glow spent. She looked out toward the ocean. The ship was still there anchored, waiting, but she knew what she had to do. She turned away from the sea. The world thought she had gone west to disappear. But Arya Stark hadn't vanished. She had become something else. A sentinel, the girl who said no to death had found where it lived, and she stayed because someone had to.